Thank you very much, Mr. Marks, for your introduction. Conference President, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to report as rapporteur of the 5th Annual International Forum, which had the title of International Cybercrime, Occurrence, Development and Prevention, and took place at Oldenburg this year. And Mr. Marx has already said it. We had highly interesting contributions. We had an interesting forum, which only concluded a couple of minutes ago, actually, after a lively debate, intensive exchange among experts and audience. And it is a challenge to me now, because I listened to all the presentations. I've prepared quite some paper, and I last minute performed some additions, because now obviously I am in charge to inform you about the most important results of this forum. All in all, we had 6 presentations on sub-aspects on the situation. This is almost a police report. What is the development? What are the effects on people's life caused by the internet? And as this is the German Congress on Crime Prevention, which counteraction can be taken with regard to cybercrime? One speaker said we speak about Web 2.0, Crime 2.0, and also Prevention 2.0. We had different perspectives. That was really interesting perspectives from safety authorities represented by 2 members of the Federal Criminal Police Office, Mr. Ulin and Mr. Hamanske, who presented the police phenomenologically. Then Mr. Ackermann of ECHO Association of the German internet industry, who gave us an interesting perspective from the economy with regard to preventive action, but also cooperation, and also cooperation with safety authorities. Mr. Frank Tendler, a media consultant, he spoke about social networks, possible risks and developments to be expected in the future, and countermeasures. Just to put it very clearly, Marco Arno Hartwig told us the EU Commission's perspective, so the European level, and then Cornelia Schild for the Federal Office of Safety in Information Technology, and Franz Cargo of the ECHO Association told us about a public-private partnership which is quite successful in combating so-called bot networks. So, in the minutes to come, I would like to convey to you the major findings and contents of this forum, but I also would like to convey the mood, which was fluctuating a bit between euphoria with regard to opportunities and chances of the internet, but also depression on the other side, which somehow occurred, especially once the police representative showed or depicted the risk environment. And one participant put it clearly and said, moving on the internet, this is like ice skating on natural ice. Sometimes you don't know how thin or thick the ice is, and sometimes it is really very thin, but still it's fun. And I think that this is also true for internet and activities in the internet. The structure I've prepared in order to tell you about the main findings is following the logics. How's the situation? And I start with a pleasant spot, the light spots of the internet, because apart from crime, those points also played a role. That is the enormous potential the internet provides for social and societal development on national and on international level, and also the finding which was mentioned in our opening session, more and more people find access to the internet, not only young people but also elderly, that is 60 onwards. That is the number we heard. 40% of Germans who are 60 and older are moving on the internet, which is quite a high number. Utilization duration in younger generation, that is between 14-year-old to 30-40 years, is increasing drastically. So this development is unbroken. The victory of the internet continues. And one chart shows this. The book is not really failing No, the charts show that there's an upwards trend, though the upwards trend is not as steep as for the internet. For all those who represent TV and radio, these classic media are on the withdrawal. So internet, an important element for all societal areas, education, profession, trade, services, but also social contacts, and here in particular social networks. And we experience all and use how processes, whatever they have been in our life, are shifting now, relocated into the internet, online banking, the tax statement, which the finance authorities prefer through the internet, registering your car online, and so on. And because of the mobility of devices, you can do this from almost anywhere around the globe. You can initiate such transactions. So access is possible from anywhere. Opening hours of authorities are no longer a restricting factor, and maybe new forms of communication can be established. We can start new contacts and maintain them. And this is something we do not only see at our country, but you know these nice billboards where you have Europe and the US in bright colors. I think we saw such a map yesterday here as well. But also on the African continent, at least this is what our speaker said, these numbers increase significantly because mobile devices are spreading increasingly. So this is the light side, the nice side of the internet, which is making us euphoric and happy, wondering what one should buy, which device one should get once. Okay, but there's Congress on crime prevention in order to participate even better. Okay, but there's the dark side, and the dark side we were more focusing on. That is the portals of threats, the social media, online banking, geodata, which are playing a more and more important role. E-commerce, where IT safety is not always part of the original architecture. And if at all, they are retrofitted at a later stage and added on at a later stage. And we confirmed this in our forum. International perspective, we have classic forms of crime which are duplicated in the internet. So there are threats in the real world, and now we have threats on the internet. But we also have new phenomena of threats which did not yet exist in the real world. What experts deplored was the situation as to gaining an overview over the phenomena. The numbers, whether these are valid, as for example the police crime statistics, or numbers that enterprises and company publish pursuing a certain interest, whether these numbers are correct. Well, our experts did not really trust them that much, but we don't have anything else apart from those published figures. This is why they were presented, the police crime statistics, and you know that the Minister of the Interior, Friedrich, said this a couple of days ago. Cybercrime is one of the growth areas in the crime statistics, whereas with regard to other offenses, we see a pleasant development that the numbers are receding. For cybercrime, this is different. Between 2009 and 2010, we see growth rates of almost 20%. And also, if you look at the damage that's occurred, damages due to cybercrime, there again we see an increase of 50 to 60% for the different sectors of damages. These are worrying figures. However, what we do not really know, and I come back to this is the non-registered cases, because private people who had been damaged do not really know that their PC is part of a worldwide crime network, or others know that they had been damaged, but because of loss of face, they simply do not want to address this matter.
Now, this is a phenomenon that we have discussed among the police here present, and I think we had a sense of some of the complexity of this new type of net crime. Because, once again, the perpetrators to nil come from all sorts of classical crime sectors that we're familiar with in the judiciary, so organized crime, corruption, child pornography, Here in Germany too, industrial espionage, fraud, terrorism, the whole gamut is found on the internet, everything you find in the real world essentially. But something that made all of us think a lot was just how phenomenon of stealing digital identities online, with which perpetrators then go shopping worldwide, or creating essentially parallel identities and digital clones, is an issue in connection with the hacking case that Sony experienced, where credit cards and personal data was stolen, and you can just imagine the kind of damage that can be caused in such a case. We see the development, and the experts have described this quite clearly, in the area of phishing. I imagine most of you will have received mails like this at some point. It started kind of obviously a couple of years ago, but through social engineering, these perpetrators have become a lot more professional, so that sometimes you don't even notice that you've got a Trojan through drive-by infections. You go on some website, assume the website is from the German criminal police agency or something like that, but in fact it's a fake, and you can catch a Trojan here. Then we've got protection money and taking people hostage, as it were. Mafia 2.0, they no longer basically rob banks. Bank robbing has died out, essentially, at least in Germany. So what criminals do is threaten companies through spam attacks, and if the companies think it's a fake, then they go ahead with it and do it. And we've had some cases here in Estonia as well. Malta as well have shown that there are real damages possible here, that companies and smaller countries can experience serious problems with. One issue in the future, and this is something that the experts have referred to, are mobile end devices. You all have these, and they have more and more functions in them, starting with classical telephoning. But now you have all kinds of different options for communicating via the internet. There are lots of things that you can surf, watch, listen, and these end devices are increasingly going to be the targets of attacks, botnets as well. So this is something from the point of view of prevention that needs to be a focus. It's now the case that an underground economy has developed. There's a supply of criminal products that you can find on the internet. You can buy yourself credit card data, botnets, Trojans, and such things at a cheap price and without having to have too much knowledge of the internet. But you can cause a great deal of damage with this. So this was the first day, which one participant said this was our depression day, a day when we basically all went home and thought, what can we do to prevent this cybercrime, and are the tools that we have at hand effective? Where is the enemy? And somebody said the enemy's at home, the enemy's in our computer, and often we don't even know they're there. And the people who are best familiar with these systems are our children, age 11, 12 to 20, who have the expertise. These digital natives know more than their parents do, but aren't necessarily as careful as they need to be. Thus, we came to part 2 today, and at the focus of our debate was, what do we have to combat this crime in terms of players and tools? All of the speakers, or nearly all of them, were of the opinion, and this is perhaps an important message that we're going to take home from this Congress on Crime Prevention, is that nationally and internationally we are talking about an enormous number of initiatives that we have in trying to prevent crime. So many players are out there trying to come up with countermeasures to combat cybercrime. But all of the speakers also agreed when it came to evaluating the situation in Germany as being in need of catching up, that we're well behind, and that there are lots of areas regarding awareness, IT savviness. We need to come up with some countermeasures quickly to close the gap between the cybercrime developments and where we are in society as a whole. So impressive, on the one hand, the number of political campaigns and initiatives. You'll be aware of this on the UN level, on the G8 level, OECD, European Union, and then the intelligence, the military, the police, trade and industry, all are doing what they can in this area. And you will know that in Germany in March we've had a cyber security strategy of the German government, and all the same experts say on the whole in Germany we are lagging behind. I think we've heard from the experts what are the important issues are. Of course, there is risk protection and law enforcement. 130 employees, for example, in the German Criminal Police Agency, in all kinds of different areas, police, detectives, IT specialists, forensic scientists, etc., all working to combat crime. Your classical police crackdowns, which pose major challenges for forensic scientists and judges. How can one track fingerprints, as it were, online so that they can be used later on in a court case? And if we think about computer espionage in industry and in banks, the amount of data we encounter cause huge problems in today's world. We have such a lot of data. So we need to think about the future developments, not least the dynamism in this area of crime. We would do well in the area of industry and the public sector to ensure that our experts are equipped with modern technologies and scenarios to look at what trends are on the horizon so that we aren't lagging so far behind, but rather look to the future as well. And some interesting examples cropped up here. Modern payment systems, web money, and more. But also sort of futuristic ideas that some of our speakers came up with, such as camouflage caps, for example, that you can cover your tracks with and be secretive. There are so many different cooperation forums that are out there that we already heard. Trade and industry is doing a great deal. But we also heard about cases and examples where crime prevention programs of other players, such as schools or in the municipal area, are supported. And Oldenburg, I think, is doing very well here. Certainly proof that this can work quite effectively. In terms of the level of the user, computer users, I think all of the talks we heard suggested that sensitivity to the cybercrime must be enhanced, that we can't just rely on experts for antivirus software who cannot offer 100% security, but can only ever combat the viruses that they are able to identify. Public-private partnership is an issue I touched on earlier, and here we talked about a current example, the Anti-Botnet Advice Center, as I said, a cooperation between the German Agency for Security and Internet Security, Information Security rather, and the ECHO Federation, which works together with the internet service providers and the antivirus software manufacturers. And there are initial service providers also involved in the initiative who want to get on board. Perhaps what's interesting in this concept is that it's not just offering advice on a strategic level, but if you are a victim of a botnet attack as a user or as a company, you can get advice by ringing the call center, the hotline, and the experts have said, if necessary, their employees in the call centers can actually go through with the caller blow by blow to set up a working plan, so at the end of the day they can remove the Trojan horse, the Trojan from their computer. So then we also went away and thought about what sort of a summary could we give you, first of all, of these forums. Well, perhaps first of all we can say that in terms of the players involved, essentially the finding that we are not starting at zero, certainly not in Germany, but not within Europe or the world. There's a whole range of players out there. But one of the real weaknesses was diagnosed as being a fragmented allocation of competencies. Too many cooks spoil the broth, not enough coordination. So the synergy effects we need to harness are getting lost, and the prevention activities don't necessarily reach the target group they are tailored to. And another point here, the development dynamism, the pace of change on the internet and in the area of cybercrime is hardly going to slow down. Professor Pott told us yesterday that technological innovations used to give us time to think things through. Experts are now saying we don't have any turnaround time. We have to be really fast. We have to respond fast. Otherwise, we will be overtaken by developments. And as the government or as private players, we will just be trying to catch up. One example was the introduction of the ETAN banking PIN system, which made there be a dramatic drop in phishing cases 1 year, but it's shot up again, which means cybercrimes are catching up. Essentially, you only have about 12 months' time before you have to come up with new cyber countermeasures. The criminals were basically able to crack the new system very, very quickly within just 3 months. So we've got to stay on the ball. There's some dramatic changes that we can expect in the future, as well as our experts have suggested. More operational systems apart from those that are dominating the market at the moment will be added through smartphones. The use of the internet is going to increase exponentially. Social networks will change, they will grow, although here we're seeing the trend to not just having one platform behind a social network, but rather information being exchanged transmedially across supposed boundaries of these individual platforms. And as we already heard, the new payment systems are just one example of the pace of change we're likely to see in the future. And cybercrime, particularly, this was something said by the police speakers, is on the rise. And another issue, following on to what Dr. Stefan said yesterday here, the forum is basically suggesting that we have to strengthen our knowledge of what is going on in the internet. We have to expand our horizons, classic criminology, to find out more about the phenomenon, more about the quantitative scope of cybercrime, unrecorded cases. The estimated number has to be assessed. So classical criminological work on the one hand, but we also have to carry out research on existing IT so that we can reduce the number of potential crime scenes online, strengthen our IT security, something that the German government is working on in terms of its R&D to do more about what Ms. Stefan said yesterday when she said we only know a little bit about the risks, perpetrator and victim structures in the internet world. Then the understanding of how important prevention is. Combating cybercrime is an issue that all of society must take on. But I think the experts have made quite clear that cybercrime remains a cross-discipline issue. We need to come up with strategies across the board. Everyone has to take on their responsibility in the value chain, from consumers, companies, and government, and social discourse about what happens on the internet and what shouldn't happen on the internet is something our experts believe needs to be intensified. We have to think about who gets which role, private players, public players, whether awareness is enough. We heard in one speaker say, don't be stupid, but is that enough prevention, or do we need more state regulation? How much freedom should we have online? And what role do the individual players play here? Is it enough just to have net ethics or online ethics that is generated by consumers? Or do we need more regulation as inspired by Sarkozy, for example, what he was referring to when he spoke to internet representatives, that we should have more state regulation? World Wide Web is, of course, a global phenomenon. We always say it's the same everywhere, but even here in Germany, we know that there are different evaluations of the extent to which the state should interfere. The debate we have about the law on making access to the internet more difficult makes this clearer. There was a huge debate about censorship that was triggered by this act. In Northern Europe, people perhaps don't quite understand us, where, for example, the stop signs on the internet was something that internet service providers actually offered their users. Another thing that we saw as a thread going through the day was that media competency is something that has to be fostered throughout society as a universal approach to cybercrime prevention. One speaker said we have to start with our children as soon as they pick up a mouse or any other device connected to the internet. We have to start with awareness generation right then and there. And another point, we need to have more cooperation between public and private sectors, nationally and internationally. And this is the good news. There are local initiatives, local forms of cooperation nationally and internationally, and we need to expand these. Perhaps in some cases offer some scientific support to see just to what extent we can organize these networks in order to be as efficient as possible. And it's also the opinion of our experts that the support available out there has to be expanded. The botnet support center is a typical example of cooperation between an association and a public authority. This is a good example of the kind of cooperation that's helpful. It's a bit like the police break-in advice centers. You may be familiar with these here. Typical criminal fields in which the police have set up good support. Experts are saying cybercrime victims need to get the same kind of support. There needs to be a state hotline that you can ring up if you need help. And another aspect, we have to adapt our approach to the actual situation. With cybercrime, there has to be the last page of the flyer, if you like. We have to make sure that we really reach everyone below the crease, as it were. We need new social engineering. We need to know how we can target the right group at what time of day we can reach people. So listen, learn, and lead was the slogan that we heard. And leadership then in the area of cybercrime prevention being the order of the day. Because Stefan questioned this to a certain extent, wondering whether when it comes to crime prevention, the methods of the analog world can actually be applied to the digital world. The conclusion I think we've come to is that this is a bit dubious. It was our sense, and our experts were, I think, of the view that the set of tools we use here has to be expanded. My last point, we need to ensure that we have sufficient resources, hardly surprising. That's perhaps one of the pleasant side effects of public-private partnerships, is that industry gets involved in the financial side of things to finance training in its various forms and to finance a future-oriented approach to try and keep up with the pace. again, we have to stay ahead of the game if we are to not just catch up, but be ahead. That's all, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that's given you a sense of the bigger picture and the main findings of our international forum. I'd like to use this opportunity to thank all of the speakers for their excellent talks. And I'd like to thank everyone who contributed to the discussions and to the talks we had in our breaks. And so, Mr. Marks, Mr. Towns, I'd like to conclude my remarks. Thank you for your attention.